Hello and welcome to ECG's webinar. I'm Mark Lindsey. I'm here with Jason Hertzog. We'll introduce ourselves a little more in just a second, but our topic today is on enterprise communications. We're looking at AI, where Alianza is, MetSapiens, Oracle, and Nokia. In our presentation today, we'll be talking about a number of different topics and surveying a lot of the activity that's been happening in this space over the past few months, the things that have come out at trade shows, announcements, and events like that. So I'll get right into it with a couple of introductions. Thanks for joining, everyone. We see we've got a great crowd on, and we really look for your questions and your comments. So I'd love to have your comments and questions in the Q&A panel of the event. You can pull that up in the Zoom interface and send in your questions that way. So love to have your questions there. We really depend on them to help us drive the conversation and be sure it's serving what we need. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Mark Lindsey, VP of Engineering here at ECG. I've been with the company for a couple of decades, and I lead a large part of our engineering team. And I'm pleased to introduce to our webinar audience, Jason Hertzog. He's a candidate for associate member of technical staff, one of our engineers with a lot of work in the AI space in particular. So thanks for joining, Jason.
Yeah, glad to be here, Mark.
So we're going to jump right in with a few topics today. And let me change what I'm showing here. So one of the things I want to talk about is, what's our point of what are the kind of things that we want to cover in a webinar like this? And so it really reflects what ECG does. So we're speaking primarily to the industry of voice and unified communication providers and broadband providers. And so that's kind of our general scope and our focus. Now we have a number of enterprise customers that are very large organizations that functionally operate a lot like their own private unified communications organization, where they have, they're multinational, they have voice users all over the place, or they're a large broadband organization where they're running a very large broadband network, and it really functions a lot like a independent broadband operator. There's two main sides of it. One is the competitive landscape. So if customers or users are looking at your service, what else are they comparing it to? So if you've got a great service, you built it a few years ago, well, customers are, when they're shopping you, they're also shopping, competitive alternatives. So what does that look like? That's one of our areas that we think a lot about. And the other is opportunities for new features and functionalities that you can offer primarily in the voice and broadband space. So what can you do to take your network and actually add more functionality and features to it? And we're especially interested in those things that you can integrate into your core product. So there's a kind of product that you can offer, and I'm thinking of some of the 900-pound gorillas of the meetings space, where basically what you're doing is you're providing an elegant interconnection between your product and their product, but effectively it's their brand name. So when folks go to their, your service, they're seeing the brand name of some other company. I'm especially interested in finding opportunities for where you can integrate in products into your core product so that you can make your product better and you're not effectively co-selling with another company. You've integrated something in, a new feature or service. Now, there's nothing wrong with any kind of model that works for you for selling it, but I'm especially interested in the cases where we can have those integrations. So that's really the view that we've got in mind. We're looking for your questions and comments. Hope you do send them in. Extra points for being the first person to ask a question today. I'd love to get your questions and your thoughts. Anything hot that's going on, we'll be getting to it. So why don't we
Oh, I think I lost you. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so from what I heard, something interesting to me is the private 5G. I was kind of wondering what private 5G is all about.
Yeah, let me show a couple of slides just to help with this conversation. So private 5G is something that we have been spending a fair bit of time thinking about. Private 5G is a way that you can provide connectivity, and you hear about it a lot in the manufacturing space. Primarily, it's one of the really big areas. So what makes it? Why would you use private 5G for that kind of space? I'll get to that in a second. But what I want to clarify is that I don't mean that you're buying a cell phone or data plan from one of the big carriers. So in the U.S., we've got AT&T T-Mobile and Verizon, those would be it. And of course, you can privately buy a data plan from one of those carriers. That's not really the application of private 5G. It's not what we mean. Think of it as an addition to Wi-Fi, but with a larger coverage area because you've got higher power radios, you've got more sensitive antennas and systems that are able to detect signals from further away. So bigger coverage area than what you can do with a Wi-Fi access point. You've got a stronger or a more robust security authentication system because it's the authentication system that's built to provide the access controls for service providers who are selling mobile networks. So that effectively, instead of just having a Wi-Fi ESSID, basically the network name and a password, you'd have a something like a SIM card or an eSIM with a full authentication mechanism built into it. You've also got a stronger form of encryption, and there's some robustness against attack that you've got on cellular networks that's not really built into Wi-Fi networks. And so private 5G gives you that additional some of those security technologies. You've also got reliability. So you've got if you think of delivering data on a per packet basis, like how does that work and how does that change things? And so with private 5G, the goal is to provide a higher reliability than you would have on delivering packets across a Wi-Fi network. And it's managed spectrum is kind of related to all this. So instead of just being a free for all, which is what Wi-Fi is, basically the rules with Wi-Fi is anybody can use the channel. If it doesn't work well for you one day, then so bad. So that's too bad for you. There's not really anything built into Wi-Fi about doing that. Well, with the managed spectrum philosophy of the private 5G services and all the 5G and 4G services, there's basically an organized way that a certain operator gets access to certain spectrum. And one of the amazing things, if you're a service provider or you've got customers operating in the United States, the US is one of the best areas for this because of some policies that were put in place to provide access to some spectrum that we can use in the US. You can sign up and register in an automated fashion, and it works nearly everywhere. Except right at naval installations, where you have naval installations, they basically get first dibs on the spectrum. But for most of the landmass of the United States, you've got access to this spectrum in a managed way. So instead of what happens with normal Wi-Fi signal, where you're competing with spectrum for all the neighborhood Wi-Fi access points and plus all the microwave ovens that are also transmitting at 2.4 gigahertz. With the private 5G managed spectrum, you get some dedicated access to spectrum. So if part of your business is connectivity, whether you're thinking of fiber, broadband, or you're delivering Ethernet to some locations, or you've got Wi-Fi as part of what you're doing, if that's an essential part of your business, then you should really be thinking about private 5G enough to understand it and determine whether and where it's relevant. And it may not be that you actually build the private 5G network yourself, but knowing how it works and what it's all about is important.
So I'm curious, just to jump in real quick. What are some of the ways that people are actually using it today?
Yeah, that's a good question because it's such a weird concept because it's somewhat different from Wi-Fi that it's not always obvious. So I kind of jumped into manufacturing applications, but let me dig in a little bit about that. So manufacturing applications, imagine you've got a factory, a manufacturing facility of some kind. What the folks who work on the operational technology and the information technology side are both needing to use data to connect to things. So traditionally, the IT side, which is functionally like everyone's laptops and printers, they generally are going to use conventional enterprise technology, so Wi-Fi and such. But that's even really challenging in that environment because often manufacturing facilities they have a lot of metal walls. They have areas that are functionally Faraday cage that the signal doesn't transmit through very well because they need, a big metal box in order to do the manufacturing, or they have, thick brick walls for blast shielding and things like that. So the environment is already pretty challenging. On the OT side, the operational technology side, this is industrial controls functionality. Generally, this is done with direct cabling because Wi-Fi technology has been tested and it's usually not a great fit for a lot of cases. It's not robust against the signals, the frequencies. It can be challenging to get it around the corners where you need, so you end up with a really dense network of Wi-Fi access points, according to experts in the industry. That's what they see. So you can't just have the same number of Wi-Fi access points, like one per room, that you would have with conventional Wi-Fi for enterprise IT functions. You've got to have a lot of Wi-Fi access points turned down with the power tuned just right in the channels that are organized just right in order to support the application. So the net result is there's a pullback in the operational technology side away from use of Wi-Fi. So You've got the spectrum, so you've got radio signals that are being used in the that overlap with the Wi-Fi signal within the manufacturing environments. You've got a lot of metal walls, you've got reflective buildings and things like that. The spectrum is not guaranteed, so you're really functionally competing with every other nearby Wi-Fi access point. And if you're talking about you want to have a self-driving robot that's able to navigate around an area, then generally the assumption is you're going to need continuous connectivity to control that thing to be able to hit the red stop button whenever you need to and have the signal go through in a reliable way. So Wi-Fi, since it's just kind of a free-for-all for spectrum, if it works, then it works. If it doesn't work, then too bad. Then in some cases, you end up with some irregularities and inconsistencies there. Another huge case besides manufacturing applications that you hear a lot about is ports. So think airports and shipping ports. And one of the big factors here is really long distances. So Wi-Fi signals can only be transmitted up to a certain a maximum level, and then the sensitivities of the radios for receiving the signal back are limited in what they can achieve, basically built around those levels. So if you have really large distances and you need to connect data to moving devices, moving ships and planes and cars and trucks and all the equipment that operates at a shipping port or an airport, then you need really long ranges for doing that. So that's another one of the big use cases. But there are also cases where it's being used where a data network needs to be built without integration or interference with local Wi-Fi. And these can be kind of some sort of surprising. So for example, at the University of Virginia, Comcast partnered with one of the companies I'll mention, Moso Networks, to build a private 5G network to support cameras and video feeds on that campus. So what that allowed them to do is use different spectrum to reserve the use of that spectrum to build that data network, and it doesn't interfere or integrate at all with the campus Wi-Fi. Another company, Cable Free, is building out a private 5G as a way to connect high-speed internet to homes where fiber cannot be installed. So this is sometimes called fixed wireless access, or FWA. And so Cable Free is in that space. And another example, Nokia is pretty famous, but they've installed private 5G in factories. They've announced projects where they've successfully deployed private 5G in hospitals as an alternative to Wi-Fi because of these limitations on Wi-Fi. So we're seeing, it's not just manufacturing and ports, but it's also a lot of other applications where you needed a new data network, and Wi-Fi really couldn't get the job done, or Wi-Fi, the spectrum was really already all in use.
Oh, okay, so yeah, Nokia is pretty huge, right? So it makes sense that they would be using it.
Yeah, Nokia is one of the big three mobile network equipment vendors. So you've also got Ericsson and Samsung. So Nokia and Ericsson are the two biggest, and then Samsung is also really huge, really growing right now. So what makes Nokia really interesting and unique is that they're both huge. They offer very high power radios meant to be mounted on tall poles. So basically these macro sites, which are like a normal cell phone site that you can see off in the distance, that macro site is often what you're looking at is Nokia equipment on that pole, or Ericsson equipment, or maybe Samsung equipment that's mounted on that cell phone tower, and it's intended to shoot that signal and talk to cell phones miles away. So that's the kind of equipment. So that's one of the things that makes Nokia distinct. And as I work through the different vendors and projects in this industry, what we've seen is a lot of people point to Nokia as, well, if you need to go a really long distance, then you need to talk to Nokia. Even though there may be other radios and other vendors that you want to integrate with. Nokia is really notable because of this high power. They've also got a lot of deep capabilities. They can partner with you for building it out. And they're also developing a distribution channel, which is unique. Among the three, Ericsson, Samsung, and Nokia are the only company who are developing a distribution channel to allow partners to actually go out and build these. So if you're a service provider and you've already been in the business of building fiber, or maybe you help with some enterprise Wi-Fi, then Nokia's out there. They're ready to start up new partners who can actually take their technology and sell it, whether it's the high power radios that you're going to mount, 100 feet in the air, or with the antennas 100 feet in the air, or it's lower power equipment for use inside of a shopping mall. They're willing to work with that, and so that makes them really unique and distinct. But I don't want to say that they're really the only game in town and the only company you want to think about. So some of the other companies that ECG's worked with, talked to, that are worth a look as you're digging into this are mentioned here on this slide. So we've got the Cable Free, for example, based in the UK. They do projects. I mentioned one of the projects they had done. They were doing fixed wireless access in the UK. They're based outside of Oxford University. They're one of the companies selling radios and equipment and the 5G packet cores, all the systems necessary to connect this back so that you can have the wireless network. Moso Networks is another company, US based. that's offering similar type of technology. They're the ones that I mentioned did the project in partnership with Comcast on the University of Virginia network. Acceleran, primarily based in the UK. You see this. And actually, one of the interesting things about the mobile cellular space is that the center of gravity for that is really in Europe. That's where a lot of the development and innovation has happened. And you actually see that as part of public policy. The U.S. lawmakers and policy wonks are working towards basically bringing more cellular technology to the U.S. Druid Software is an interesting company. They don't make the radios necessarily. They make, among other things, the 5G packet core, which is the part of the software that connects to the radio, and then bring that packet core is effectively the software that connects those radios to the Ethernet network or the IP network. And they've got some really neat stuff. They can do, Ethernet trunking over a 5G signal. And one of the fascinating things here is in the world of Open RAN, there's a lot of work to make interoperable technology between different vendors so that you could have a 5G packet core from one company and radios from another company and antennae from another company, and then other kind of other controller functions from different companies. That's actually already happening in the 5G world without the Open RAN standard. So a lot of times these things are happening side by side where you can buy non-Open RAN systems like from these companies that are able to interoperate with other vendors. And that's one of the big things Nokia did was open up their 5G core so that you could buy somebody else's radio and use their core, their baseband and core systems to connect back to the network. So there's a little bit of mix and match that's happening in the mobile cellular technology space that's never been available before. And also it's being unlocked so you don't have to be a T-Mobile size service provider or even a US Cellular size service provider to get in on the game and use this technology. So I think that's really pretty interesting.
I do have a question. So where do you actually buy the client side equipment, like the devices that actually connect to these private 5G networks?
Yeah, right. I'm glad you brought that up because everything I've talked about so far is like the radios and the equipment that goes on a tower or maybe on the roof of a shopping mall or in a factory. So what's the other end of the connection? Well, it's frankly, it's kind of what you already thought. Like, so here's my iPhone. It actually has radios that can already talk to the frequencies that these private 5G networks can use. So how would this work? What if I wanted to get this thing on and use this as a device in my business to maybe support a nurse or operate inside of a manufacturing facility and want to get on that core data network? Well, so what I would do is I would use one of these products and I would generate an eSIM for my phone or my tablet, my device. I would generate that eSIM. I would scan that eSIM, load that on there, and that's how my device would connect into that core network. You can do that with tablets. There's a lot of devices that already support the frequencies. In addition to eSIMs, of course, you can get physical SIM cards. So I'm sure you've seen the physical SIM cards that plug into the side of what I'm going to call old phones. Old phones still use the physical SIM cards, but there's a lot of equipment where the SIM card functions as effectively an authentication key that allows your device to connect to the cellular network operated by somebody else. So you would get a physical SIM card. So if you went with cable free, for example, you could order physical SIM cards and you'd order a private 5G core. Those physical SIM cards can be configured to when they boot up and they search the network, they're going to find your network and they're going to effectively log in and authenticate your device into that private 5G core. So that's how you connect them. So you can use, the long story short is you can use phones and tablets that are available today that are obviously unlocked devices. That means that they can join other cellular networks. And then you can also, there are adapter devices that you might have seen where it's got an Ethernet port and it's got a SIM card slot and it's got a cellular radio. So it's able to connect to a cellular network as a client, as an access device, as a station, and then it registers to the network using that SIM card or that eSIM, and then it provides you an Ethernet port. And so that's what you'd see, for example, if you wanted to put connectivity into maybe a forestry vehicle, like a truck that they drive around in the woods when they're harvesting from a tree farm, and you want to put data into that device so that you can have live camera feeds from that. Well, that's what you would have. You would have a device on that truck that's got a cellular radio. It's connected back to the private 5G network. And then that device has a SIM card that's going to allow it to log into your private 5G network that you run. And then it's going to have an Ethernet port. And then you would use that Ethernet port. It would run maybe a DHCP server. And you'd run that Ethernet port would let you connect all the equipment inside the truck that you're connecting there. And obviously you can see how that can be adapted. You can also buy SDKs and kits and things like that to build into your own electronics. But the fact that you can already go to the store, like your local office supply store, and buy a device that will connect to your private 5G network just as easily as it connects to your Wi-Fi network, I think is pretty stunning. And it's actually a policy win for America that our network technology is matching up with what our policies allow us to do for spectrum access. And so the CBRS spectrum in the US is really a huge advantage for US based operators who want to do this. This is actually substantially harder in a lot of countries to take advantage of this.
That's really I do have one more question. So how does this like matter for the voice and broadband service provider?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to stop sharing so you can share here in a second, Jason.
Okay.
Yeah, last point I want to make is what you just said. How does it matter, if somebody else out there is doing this? Well, if you're involved in delivering packets to somebody's location, if you're pushing data across Wi-Fi networks or broadband, or that's an essential part of what you do, is like you need to help deliver the data to some particular location, whether it's a hospital or hotel or manufacturing facility or a baseball stadium or your, Madison Square Garden entertainment, and you're pushing data to the food and beverage department, that's around the border of the MSG Madison Square Garden building. If that's part of your business, then private 5G is worth a look. Where does that fit in? How does that complement Wi-Fi? Because it's not like you're going to turn off Wi-Fi, but there's some things that just Wi-Fi is just not good at. There's sometimes where you need mobility and an Ethernet cable is not a good option. So private 5G gives you some options for that longer range, that higher robustness and reliability that you can't get in some other way. So that's really where it's relevant. If you're already in this business, you're already pushing data across networks, then that's what private 5G is for. Um, so changing subjects a little bit. I back in when I was in college, I heard people talking about AI. We studied AI, we did AI based projects, but frankly, I just haven't heard anybody mention AI in our industry lately. What about you?
I have heard whispers of AI.
Oh, whispers.
No, but AI is seemingly everywhere. It's integrated into our phones, computers, and even some of our refrigerators. But what does AI mean? More specifically, what does AI mean for the communication service providers? So today, we'll be looking at 4 ways that AI is being used around the communications industry. And I'll kind of quickly go over the 4 ways first, and then we'll go more in depth. So first, AI is being used to solve some customer problems with related to human escalate, or excuse me, without human escalation. Second, it's being used to improve contact center agent confidence by being on the side of the agent who's actually handling the call. Third, it's being used to enable accurate real-time translations, which could be helpful for global teams. And fourth, AI is being used to handle an entire customer issue from start to finish. Um, so I'll go over these 4 cases with examples from these companies in specific. There's a bunch of companies, it's everywhere. But these are the 4 that I chose. I have Alianza. They're a cloud service provider that recently acquired Metaswitch. DeepL is actually a German software company launched in 2017 that specializes in translation. ASAP is a company founded in 2014 that automates customer service interactions. And we have NICE. And that company actually goes back to 1986 and has a long history in the customer service contact center space.
Okay, so in all seriousness, yeah, at the conferences and trade shows, so I'm thinking of Mobile World Congress, the Cloud Connections, Enterprise Connect, ITEXPO, some of the, not all, but some of the big conferences here, then I actually am seeing AI used everywhere. I kind of think it's being overused. I think people are vague on what it means. I think a lot of things are being called AI that really sound like that looks old-fashioned to me. And then I think some people honestly are trying to be smart by using the term. So can you help us get like a working practical definition that's really going to be applicable to voice or broadband service providers?
Yeah. So I'll start with the dictionary definition of
Okay.
AI, and then we'll move on. So the capability, or excuse me, the definition of AI is the capability of computer systems or algorithms to imitate intelligent human behavior. So it's a broad term, and it includes everything from statistical modeling, role-based systems, expert systems, um, and to really arguably most forms of sophisticated automation beyond just like simple macros is now being marketed as AI. So like I like to think of like automated warnings that are triggered by like statistical thresholds. While valuable, these methods definitely differ from the neural networks and the deep learning models that represent the more complex end of the AI spectrum today. And often what people are really impressed by falls under the umbrella of like machine learning and its powerful subdomains. So let's quickly define machine learning, and I won't use the dictionary this time. So normal software gets better when a programmer, or excuse me, when a programmer writes the instructions to make it do something better, right? You have the algorithm, you tell it exactly what you want. Machine learning is when the software improves the tasks without being directly programmed to do so. So how did they get better? You've got to have some sort of formatted data that can be used to train the model. And during training, the data is used to make predictions. Depending on whether it was right or wrong, the software improves itself by minimizing the chance of an incorrect output later. And so as a quick example, like in customer service, your data might all be the transcripts from your calls. And they have already been classified by quality assurance as good or bad. They have the grade. And so that's pretty good data that you could feed. Now, I wouldn't go as far to say as any call, never vetted, you should use that as training. There's a really common phrase, garbage in, garbage out, and it means a lot. It definitely starts with good data. But so I'm going to cover, I guess, three different common ways that machine learning is defined, because it's not just one thing. So let's start with supervised learning. So supervised learning is when we have something like a transcript of a call and it's been graded by the QA, and we label it as good or bad. And during training, the model is gonna make a prediction, and it will match it up and say, okay, you passed the test, that was right, or okay, that was wrong, and now we're gonna make some adjustments. We actually make adjustments either way. Then you have something like unsupervised learning. And this is the training process. It doesn't involve any labeling. It's very useful for finding like hidden patterns in data that aren't easily caught by humans. I think a good example of this is fraud detection. That is something that, excuse me, unsupervised learning would be actually pretty good at. And then there's a third main category, and it's called reinforcement learning. And it takes actions and receives feedback in the form of rewards and penalties. So over time, the agent will learn to make the choices that maximize reward and minimize penalty. And there are many other techniques. There are so many other techniques, but these are the few fundamental ones in machine learning that I really wanted to cover, just because I feel like they're so foundational to the idea of machine learning in general.
Okay, so I get that there are these categories: supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning. But if if I'm developing products, or I'm, doing engineering at a voice service provider, like, is it really helpful for me to know the difference? Like, why is that helpful?
Yeah, it's definitely it's helpful to know the definitions, because when you compare just the old school methods of like the statistical modeling to what's actually impressing people, and it's all being wrapped up. But you should always really be asking, where's the data coming from? Especially, it's the first thing. So with some products, they're using a data set built from a giant library of text, books, websites they've scraped online. And with some products, they just use your data, such as your call transcripts or recordings or your knowledge base. And then there's the category of training. It could be you have data that you need to tag the data, or excuse me, you have the data, but you need to tag the data, right? Again, going back to you might have call transcripts, but you definitely want to vet it before you just feed it in, garbage out. So, for example, when the network logs look like this, and then it correlates to bad network outcomes. But when the logs say that, it relates to perfectly normal system behavior. That's what we like. And so that's pretty much how I would describe the different. It starts with the data with machine learning, and so it's very important. But yeah, okay. So enough about definitions.
Thanks.
Now, yeah, you're welcome. Now, let's look at the example of the different AI that I got to experience at Enterprise Connect. So there were many vendors that had demos at Enterprise Connect showing the power of their, customer-facing AI agents. And these tools are being designed to like reduce the friction for the customer by handling common issues fully autonomously, really. And so the goal, I think, is to solve problems faster and get the more complex issues that may actually require a human agent. Get them to the human faster, right? If you're doing all the trivial self-service stuff with AI, then the actual problems that matter, they make it to the agents faster, less hold time, everyone's happier. But so it was hard to like narrow it down, but we're going to look at NICE and ASAP in particular. And so starting with NICE, let me see. So they emphasize augmenting human agents and gathering insights like throughout the customer interaction with their AI solution, which they call Enlighten Copilot. And you can kind of see, so in this screenshot, it shows a text chat. And on this screenshot, I believe this one's a little bit better demonstration for VoIP. And so this actually could come from a voice call itself. And you can see that it's offering, or excuse me, it's analyzing customer sentiment. It has the different links for the knowledge-based articles, and not shown here, but it also includes just really, there's so many features. But the tool initiates customer interactions using AI to get like the background about the issue. So when you call in, it's not immediate wait. It's you talk to the AI. The AI determines if they can fix it or not, and if they can't, move you on. So only after the basic info is in place does the call move to a human agent. So once the human agent is dealing with customer, NICE's product, they try to provide this real time context aware assistance. And so the Copilot can find these knowledge base articles. They can suggest de escalation strategies, which is really cool, but I don't have a picture of it. And they base all of this around the customer sentiment too, which I just thought was pretty fascinating. And they were not alone in this. But something unique to NICE is that they don't require call recording for this AI functionality. So the other vendors I talked to at Enterprise Connect, they all were saying like theirs does require, because a lot of people can do this, but everyone else seems to need the call recording. And so if your if your organization doesn't always use call recording, the NICE likely has like a small competitive edge there. And I think I lucked out because I talked to them first. But so they set the standard and made me ask that question of everyone else.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, ECG does work in the compliance engineering space. We work with law firms, and so we can partner with attorneys and figure out kind of what the laws are specifically in a particular jurisdiction. So, one of the places where call recording or even inferring information from call content really matters big is in California. So, if one party on your phone call is in California, and it's hard to tell, you can't look at their phone number. You got to know where they are in order to comply with the law, as I understand it. I'm not a lawyer, but we work with lawyers and they're our friends. But if one of those parties is in California, you need to do some special things. So if you can avoid doing something that crosses that red line of call recording without their permission, or call recording, may just not be desirable for your particular, use case or your customer type, then that's actually pretty powerful. So that's interesting that they're basically advertising. NICE is saying, hey, we can infer content from your calls, from audio calls, but we're not actually recording them. It sounds to me like what they're doing is a real-time transcription, but we're not retaining the audio. And so it's not there's probably some good legal questions there about, well, so how does that help you? But obviously NICE has built a whole product, pitch around that. That's actually super interesting, I think.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. For transcribing the audio to text without recording the audio, that sort of seems like a gray area of whether or not that could be considered call recording. I agree, it's very interesting. But yeah, so while NICE in Contact focuses on AI that improves the interaction between two humans, ASAP appears to be leaning more heavily towards like fully autonomous interactions using generative AI. The reason I say that is they according to ASAP, they have a 90% of calls handled by AI rate just being fully AI. So no human intervention, and they call it generative agent. And so 90% of the time, call goes in, AI just fully resolves it. And so ASAP system integrates directly with enterprise backends via APIs and using active learning integration, meaning that the AI would or should continuously improve by analyzing interactions, especially those requiring escalation. And I already have here an image on the screen. And you can see here, so this is again an example of a text chat, but this does work on voice. And so you can see here that what the generative agent is doing. And what's really interesting is, well, in my own past experiences with AI agents, sometimes they've been a little bit frustrating, especially for complex agents. So ASAP's approach kind of works around that. They include a human in the loop, so there's human oversight. And so the way they do it is, so there will be like multiple agents are handling multiple different contacts, and there's a human that's basically overseeing. So this screen I have right here, just imagine that for, I'm not actually sure how they display it, but imagine there's 6 of these and I can look at all 6 of them. And as a human, my role is to jump in and direct the AI on what to do whenever they need to, I guess, switch the direction that the AI is going. And so I guess to me, it represents an interesting philosophy where AI is the primary point of contact, and a human is there just kind of waiting as backup. Um, and so yeah, so I would say okay. So these previous 2 examples are from ASAP and NICE, and they show distinct approaches to contact center AI. Where NICE is focused on having AI greet the customer before moving them on to a human agent, and they can handle some trivial problems, but they're mostly getting you to the agent. Um, and ASAP is focused on having the entire issue handled by AI by pushing the boundaries of like just autonomous, I guess, issue resolution, right? But while keeping a human in the loop. Um, and so I guess both of these are examples of how AI is changing how we do business, really. I mean, I think ASAP's approach to having one human monitor several ongoing issues at once has, uh, I just find that so much more interesting to personally for how like call centers and contact centers in general operate today. But let me see
Yeah,
here.
yeah, that's good. If there are any questions, please remember to send them in the Q&A. One comment that we got from Mark Vange at Automately. Some other great use cases are the anonymization of data, removing personally identifiable information or protected information, PCI payment card information from transcripts, conversion of free-form interactions into structured data that you could load into a CRM or other record tracking. I think is really cool and powerful because often humans are just kind of flexible and then creative. And so being able to pull out like what was the name of the customer and the product in use and issue and software version, and being able to pull that data out and then load that in structured data. But that's a really cool point. I'm glad Mark mentioned that. Automation of onboarding compliance documentation, he says. Ongoing validation of compliance commitments. I think this is an interesting one. We've heard about this compliance commitment thing going on where folks are using AI to try to see, well, does this document or this exchange actually apply or correlate with the commitments that we've made in this other document over here? And so instead of having to slog through contracts or expect that your customer service agents are going to be experts in the nuances of the customer contract, using a tool to assist with that process. I think that's really new. That seems like a kind of a new frontier. I'd love to see additional maturity there and proofs of kind of performance and some hard testing. I think for like the compliance commitment thing, I think that's a ripe area. I think it's really cool because what you've got is all these contracts and commitments and regulations even. And so if you could get some machine assistance to work through that, that a lawyer can really look at and say, yeah, that it made a good decision on that. Or, in the training process, we can confirm that it's making good inferences from that data. I think those are really interesting. Now, Jason, you also mentioned DeepL. I wonder, you said they're not really a contact center software operator, but they're showing up in our telecom communication space. Tell us more.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, moving beyond the contact center, DeepL, they actually had a demo that showed their AI implementation with Microsoft Teams, and it was translating text or excuse me, not text. It was translating voice in real time between German and English, and it was really cool to see. And DeepL attributes its high accuracy and natural sounding translation to over 9 years of deep learning experience. This is all they do, or all they've been doing. And so, beyond the core translation feature, DeepL offers features like dictionary lookups, alternative phrasing suggestions, and a clarify button for context-specific options. And when she was showing me it, she was saying that a lot of people like to use that when they're in their international meetings, and they can kind of learn, like use it as a learning experience, which is interesting. But um, that's a little bit to the side. And so this just looked helpful for service providers working with those global teams who might have multiple languages and such. So DeepL only offers direct integration with Microsoft Teams. So if your organization doesn't use Teams, you'd have to use something like their web client. But with that said, it doesn't seem to me, at least, like it's too much of a leap to think that this type of software will make its way into phone calls in the future. I think that'd be really interesting. So and you can see here, actually, let me point that out. And this is the real-time translation. And of course, you can't really like see it, and like it's not a video, but I mean, this is happening basically real time. It was super duper impressive. But you see here. Let's go ahead and shift though to how AI is being used to really reshape the role of VoIP service providers. So I'm going to quote Dag Peak here from Alianza, and the way he put it was, by 2027, more than three-quarters of providers are planning to offer AI-enabled communication services. Okay, and so he emphasized that AI enables experiences that were basically previously impossible by also saying, with features like predictive analytics, call summaries, real-time translation, CSPs, they can offer enhanced customer experiences. And so Alianza is trying to push, or they're pushing the concept. They're positioning as a telco 4.0, and basically that's where AI is involved with the call itself. So yes, the AI listens out for when, or excuse me, like where the calling party usually is asking for details, commonly asked for, like in fraudulent situations. And then when it detects that, Alianza will actually send a whisper to the called party when these situations are detected, and warning, like they will actually warn them of the situation. And they don't show how it works, but this is what I'm guessing they're doing. I believe they're using a multi-stage like process where the system duplicates the audio stream before sending the copy to an AI system. So that way it doesn't disrupt the actual call. And then like the audio is probably the duplicated audio that the AI has. It's converted into text using speech recognition, which is pretty fast. And so the AI would likely have to be, it would have been trained to recognize, common scam patterns and suspicious phrases, but also just like normal calls. And we need to know, um, is this a normal bank transaction, or do they want me to buy some gift cards? Like, I don't know. So that's what the AI needs to be trained on. And so when potential fraud is detected, the agent will, the AI agent will inject a whisper alert to the intended party only. So like imagine a three-way call, except the caller doesn't hear the third party, only the called one
Hmm.
does. And so I just think it's such a fascinating implementation, and I wish they had a demo. I wish I could share it. But so AI in the enterprise communication space, it isn't just one thing. Customer experience automation and human agent augmentation to real-time translation, fraud prevention. These technologies are steadily like transitioning from like experiments and experimental phases and like can we do it into practical telephone communication systems, right? Like this telco 4.0 thing is super interesting because we're finally like, okay, well, maybe we could, and now it's like we can. So it's really interesting. And so, yeah, I would say, please, if you have any questions about anything I've talked about, definitely make sure to put them in the Q&A. I would love that. So, yeah.
Yeah, we got one question on the AI space. Benjamin Turpin, he was talking about video conferencing. So this may be, it looks like an opinion question he's bringing us. In the video conferencing space, do you see built-in AI or bolt-on AI as being most desirable? So I'm gonna say video conferencing. So you're doing Zoom meetings or Teams meetings, Google Meet, that sort of thing. And the bolt-on AI, I think, would be something like Otter.ai, where you've got an external system that's able to join in. It's a side-by-side product, so I'm using a Teams meeting, but I'm also using Otter. Otter is doing a transcription. It gives me some LLM-based analysis and tools to query it. It lets me search the transcript and things like that. So I'm going to interpret that as the bolt-on AI, whereas built-in would be something built in. So like within Zoom, maybe it can do transcript and save the transcript. Teams can do this too, and the Copilot products. They're built into the product, and they're integrated into a single package. So he's asking, would you see the built-in AI or the bolt-on AI as most desirable? So this sounds like clearly an opinion kind of user experience question. You mentioned there's a ton of options in the ecosystem. What do you see as table stakes versus hot items in either built-in or bolt-on offering? Again, that's from Benjamin Turpin, who's part of Oculum. Opinions there. You did this research. You spent time at Enterprise Connect. Did you see examples of these? I guess we could say of the DeepL would be an example of something that they're showing it as built in and integrated into Teams as opposed to having a separate product there. So thoughts on that topic, Jason?
Yeah. So I will say, a little confused by the difference between built-in and bolt-on. But if we're going by, because what I was thinking is bolt-on would actually be what DeepL is doing as an integration into Teams, whereas built in is Teams is doing it. And if
And it could be, yeah, it could be that I'm misreading how that experience appears. I think it's a lot to do with what's the experience. Is it happening in the meeting space, or is it happening kind of as a separate application where I'm having to interact with it? So do I have to log into a separate website to access my AI tools, or is it all built in? That's probably
Mhm.
a fair pushback that you gave me there.
Yeah. So, but I will say, it seems to me that like just the bolt-on approach would be much cheaper and easier, and let the people who do this all the time do it. That's what I would go with, unless your organization is really confident about building it right in. Just because the massive amounts of data that's required, the knowledge required, the man hours, all a lot goes into building it in, whereas bolting it on is just here, I'll give you 2000 a month or something. You know what I mean? So in my opinion, I think bolt on is going to be more desirable for most people.
That's interesting. I would think the user experience is going to be tough if it's bolt on for some people. Like, what? I got to go to a separate website. So whereas for maybe you and
Mhm.
me, technologists, like, well, sure, having multiple tabs open in one meeting, that's normal, every day. But for I think that the user experience is kind of a big question there. Like, if you ask what would Apple do type of thing, I don't think they're going to make you switch apps. If you're in a
Yeah.
FaceTime call, are they really going to make you switch apps to get the FaceTime thing? Probably not. They're probably going to try to bring it in there. I think one of the big advantages of bolt-on is they can innovate really fast. And so Otter doesn't have to ask permission from Microsoft to add some new functionality in there. Whereas Microsoft is probably going to have one product manager who's like looking at what are we going to bring and how are we going to change the team's experience. I love the fact that there are these APIs that are functionally, even if they're being kind of slightly abused in order to make them work, they're functionally allowing us to connect these separate things. One of the challenges of traditional voice telco, which is basically voice service provider offerings, where you're dialing with an E164 number, you're dialing with a phone number to get through. It's actually trickier to integrate these things in because we don't have the APIs, and so you end up having to use either an intentional SIP call flow or something like SIPREC to add in some sort of external functionality. Although I'd love to see something like Otter or some of these other tools provide connectivity through something like SIPREC. So great question. Let me jump over. I want to talk some more. You brought up Alianza. Let's talk more about Alianza, really. I'm going to share some slides here if you can let me jump in and do that. And so Alianza just recently announced the acquisition of the assets for Metaswitch. So this is pretty exciting in the space. ECG has been working closely with Metaswitch customers, and Metaswitch themselves were a customer. We did a lot of training and network design work for their customers as a contractor. And often we do that. ECG will often help technology providers grow because we'll come in and we'll join their engineering team. We'll augment something they can do. We'll even help train your core engineering team to help you develop out a product, and then you can run it independently. So that's what ECG did with Metaswitch. For a long time, we provided training products and services and also network design services that they didn't have, and a little bit of professional services. We went on site and helped with some customer deployments for Metaswitch projects. And happy to do that. Great team of people to work with. So Alianza, another great company, has acquired them now. So Alianza's focus up until this Metaswitch purchase has been a wholesale cloud-based service provider. So they wanted, if you're a service provider, you don't want to run a soft switch anymore. You don't, well, your Metaswitch platform is way old. It's not being maintained, or you just don't want to maintain the staffing and infrastructure to run all of that system locally. Then you can outsource some or all of that over to Alianza. So maybe you need to have a little bit of the network running for some regulatory purposes. You need some switching there, so you have a session border controller within your local facility network, and that lets you maintain compliance with the various local regulations or emergency calling regulations that are necessary. But then you do most of your features are actually provided by a wholesale-based service. So Alianza is providing that service. Now they're not the only one. They compete with companies like Intermedia, another great company, Momentum Telecom, another great company, Voices, a bunch of other companies are in this space that provide something similar to this. Alianza has had some really big wins though. One of their notable ones is at Lumen. They got a win of migrating some of that traffic, calling traffic off of Lumen core infrastructure, and Alianza running the infrastructure for them. So in a wholesale cloud-based provider. So this is not the same as going and just signing a contract with a provider like Zoom Phone, which is another great service that you can do it. This is a case where the phone company themselves, the telco, is taking responsibility of integrating your system, so your phone on your wall or on your desk, and so setting it up so that the core call switching is actually being provided by another vendor for them, so that so Alianza might be that vendor. So they purchased the Metaswitch assets away from Microsoft. There was apparently a lot of bidding going on there. One of their things was that Alianza did was they didn't just want to buy some software licenses, sort of own all the software and all this patent and intellectual property. They actually wanted to bring along the people too, which is great. So there's a ton of Metaswitch people who have moved over to Alianza. There's a lot of excitement about that. And really, for me, this is a level of investment that represents a real investment in service provider, voice service provider, which is a space that's kind of been flagging a little bit in the last few years. It's also it's interesting that they're promising to invest 40% of their revenue back into R&D. So this is like a startup level investment. So I don't mean to say anybody's a startup here. There's a lot of established mature technology, but that's just to put it in perspective. 40% of revenue invested back into your R&D is pretty phenomenal. And I think it's one of the signs we see companies that actually invest in their engineering, developing their product out. Those become strong, enduring products that can really last for a long time. Whereas you see some other companies that they're all about their marketing. They've got a strong sales organization, but they've got a product and it's kind of okay enough. And okay enough is what they go to market with. That's Alianza signaling that they're not planning that particular strategy. Metaswitch is always a really strong engineering organization like that. You see the same thing for I'll brag on some other friends. It's the Broadworks organization. Similar had a massive investment in engineering, just making their products better, adding features, reducing overhead and increasing efficiency. And so it's great to see companies investing in engineers like that. So within the Alianza space, there's been a lot of interest there. So Alianza is going through talking to the Metaswitch customers, connecting with them, tying up some loose ends, some things that had been left flagging a little bit with Microsoft's management. They planned a customer event for later this year in September. They've got their customer event. I'd encourage you guys to check that out. And they're looking to roll out their new product roadmap at that time. So what they're doing is they're talking to customers, they're going to make their decisions, and then roll out their roadmap at that time. You're seeing Alianza bring in new people, which is great. They're bringing in new customer-facing people. They're bringing in engineering people. And this thing that you mentioned from Dag about Telco 4.0, what I love about the concept is that it gives a whole new rationale and a logic to bring the audio through the cloud service provider. So historically, one of the main arguments for move your voice core call switching over to another company like Alianza, the logic to do that was that we don't really want to be in a core engineering organization that's employing engineers and doing some certain limited amount of software integration and configurations and operating a data center. We don't want to make that. That's not really our core business, as a company. And therefore, someone might say, who's in that position, they might say, well, let's move it over to Alianza. But then another company might say, well, actually, like engineering and innovation, that's who we are. That's what we do. And yeah, we have salespeople and marketing as well, but mostly we're about engineering. We're mostly an engineering organization. What Alianza is talking about is kind of this new concept of, well, what if you needed a data center bigger than what a normal voice provider can afford? What if you need GPUs to do LLM-based training or detection real time on calls that's way bigger, way more sophisticated than what a normal voice service provider is going to be able to do. So you're not going to be able to have 10 racks full of servers, that are loaded with GPUs in order to process all the phone calls and provide all the consumer protection features that we want to provide, like the whisper in, when you're getting scammed type of feature. You're not going to be able to do that. Or if you do, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take massive investment in this. Instead, you're going to be able to use the oversubscription and the efficiencies of bringing that call traffic over to another cloud provider. And so by providing something that's fundamentally new and interesting, it actually adds a whole new column to the equation. Does this model of either host it myself or outsource it to the cloud, like a provider like a Alianza, Intermedia, Momentum, does that do I get some new benefit from that? And the answer is yeah, this brings in a new category of benefit. So I love that they're talking about this, they're bringing it up, and they're adding sort of a new dimension to the engineering and product management equation as to whether this is the right fit for us. Do we want to invest in this way? Do we want to use this feature? Is this feature really going to work? So I'm really looking forward to what Allianz is planning to do with this line of thinking. I hope they're able to bring some things to fruition and make them available as part of a generally available product. So we're excited about that. Dag is really smart, a guy that I've worked with for a long time, and he's got great vision on products. So I'm excited to see what they're doing there, and I wish all the best for the organization. there within Alianza and Metaswitch. And for the customers there, we do a lot of work on Metaswitch platforms. It's an everyday thing for us to do maintenance activities to help with troubleshooting, to help configuring something new, to integrate your Metaswitch with something else, or to help with a migration project, that kind of thing. And so ECG is always happy to jump in with that. We'd love to just have a chat if you'd ever like to talk. Let us know how we can help.
Quick question. We're running low on time. I want to know what's going on with NetSapiens.
Yeah, so NetSapiens is got a ton of customer wins. So we're really excited about seeing that. There's growth in getting their new system deployed, new systems deployed. There's a lot of these that are coming out. Their core control offering is great to have in the marketplace. So they are one of the few vendors who will license software to you to be able to run, to operate calls within your network, to do that engineering innovation activity that I was just talking about. The market is really flooded with other options here, and Metaswitch continues to be an efficient and scalable option for that call processing and call control. They've got other features too. You can evaluate those. Actually, Jason, you and I, we recently did some performance and load testing, and we're really satisfied, really impressed with some of the performance in a virtualized environment. We were looking at call processing, core call processing performance, just the speed of being able to process calls under high volume, high loads. We're also looking at registration storms. What happens when part of your network becomes disconnected and then reconnects, and suddenly you've got to re-register everybody? And I honestly, I was pretty impressed with the efficiency and the performance that we saw there on that product. Now, people have been successfully running NetSapiens-based service providers for a long time, but we're really seeing a lot of growth there. And one of the interesting elements that's coming is if you're a service provider, you're bringing a NetSapiens platform in, is that they've taken some technology decisions so you can run your network without an SBC in certain call flows in certain situations. And so I love the fact that NetSapiens took on the challenge of providing those security features, the robustness features that you would need to do that. What this does from a technical product deployment perspective is it changes the way the NAT device functions and some of the routing and switching in the core network. That changes. That's one of the things that we do. We work a lot with routing and switching and NAT functions and SBCs and platforms like NetSapiens and Metaswitch and others. And so that's a really interesting element. And so knowing that that's not really apples for apples in every way. Different platforms have different strengths. There's really capabilities that are unique to that. And so if you're designing a network around NetSapiens, you need to know that you've got that capability, and that may allow you to move your investment around. Well, you don't have to invest the same in, let's say, SBC's licensing, or maybe for certain kinds of calls, you still want to do that. And so you want to take a NetSapiens network and add an SBC in a particular case to give you maybe integrations into privately addressed, RFC 1918 type IP address space. I'm going to move on for time to some cool stuff happening. Cisco. So Cisco purchased BroadSoft years ago. They run and maintain the BroadWorks product. They've been improving that BroadWorks product. They've integrated it. They've rolled out WebEx calling and WebEx for BroadWorks integration between for a BroadWorks service provider to be able to offer WebEx. It was really gratifying to see at the beginning of last month in early April, Cisco released a statement basically reaffirming their partnership with service providers. So when you've got a company like BroadWorks, a product like BroadWorks that's really used in a huge way to support the phone calling processing for millions of users around the world right now. Major service providers, pretty much all of the major service providers have BroadWorks inside their network, and many of the medium-sized and smaller ones as well. Then it kind of changes the way sales and marketing works. But the bad thing is, if you're a product designer or you're a vice president of engineering, then you kind of have to read from the marketing kind of which product is growing or not. So I'm really glad that Cisco has kind of reaffirmed an announcement. There's actually no change here. This is just a reaffirmation that they are committed to provider-hosted call control via Cisco BroadWorks. So yeah, they still have the WebEx calling product. You can offer that as you can use that as a wholesale option as well. But provider-hosted call control via Cisco BroadWorks is still alive and well. It's actually huge. So take it from us. We work on BroadWorks platforms all the time. We do a lot of enhancements and upgrades and just everyday maintenance on BroadWorks platforms. So it's pretty huge. Some of our customers are pretty huge. And so we know it's out there. It's nice to see Cisco basically restating that. And last one I want to touch on today is Oracle. So Chelsea Sizemore was not able to join us on our webinar today, but she works a lot with Oracle Communications as part of her product line. Or she does engineering focused on the government space. And so Oracle Communications is pretty large there. They're actually one of the largest telecom software providers in the world. So if you don't use Oracle communication software, you may have a lot of other great products, but they're pretty huge. One of the interesting things that she saw in demo was they're talking about releasing a new product called ICOM, ICOM, and they're a little cagey on what this is going to be, but it's a low code, no code call processing, call routing, feature addition type of environment. So they want you to be able to put the ICOM platform inside of a service provider network and be able to manage and route calls within that network. It actually reminds me of something comparable to bandwidth.com and their Maestro platform, where you have a low code, no code environment where you can drag and drop and you can control call routing. So it's interesting that Oracle is investing here. It's interesting that they're doing some pre-announcements in this space. So we'll just have to be watching to see the ICOM feature set, what comes out now. They also were showing this off at Mobile World Congress, so I got to talk to one of the product managers there at MWC. And this is actually based on some existing legacy products that they've had. They haven't been marketing them as an independent product as such for a while, but these products are established in the marketplace. And so bringing this out as with a new interface and a new push into that service provider market space, whether that's mobile cellular type space or fixed line voice service provider space. It's really actually pretty neat to see some new options coming to market for the voice service provider space. So I hope to have more about that. We covered these products and actually a different set of products in our strategic product briefings. So what we do is we talk about in strategic product briefings, we talk about what these new services are available, how they work for your network in particular, what the pros and cons are that we see on different products. These are some of them that are kind of in the pipeline. There's actually several other great products that we are helping our service provider clients evaluate and determine whether they want to do proofs of concept. So I'm going to stop share now, and we'll cover some questions for Jason and me. So one question from John Wigboldus: 99.9% of America is made of small and medium businesses. These AI tools often reach for small and medium business. They're out of reach for small to medium business. They apply to enterprise, which is a small set of the sales opportunities for a lot of UC providers. So if you're a UC provider, your average size of a deal is about 13 seats. So if you're thinking that's a small medium business, it could be a restaurant or a small organization, doctor's office. A lot of businesses are average size 13 phones basically. So if that's your market, what options are out there for the products that are available for AI? What options are out there, and does the cost and complexity still need to be resolved? Any thoughts on kind of what you saw? Anything focused, particularly Jason, at the small medium business place?
I'm trying to think back to Enterprise Connect, because we did ask about, the target audience. And while most of them would say small business is part of it, they really wouldn't give any clarification. Unfortunately, I really wasn't able to find any pricing. You have to talk to them and get their prices. Um, so I really couldn't answer this and actually be accurate. So
Yeah, it's interesting. So there is a lot of interest in providing these AI tools that are at the enterprise scale. I definitely agree with John on that point. I think there are some smaller scale things. So if you look at something like Otter, a bolt-on tool, to use Mark Vange's term, then you get some of the AI functionality without having to bring it in. And really, there you're just using a retail product that's not co-sold really, or sold alongside. It's not really integrated into the product. So there are some products out there that are targeted at small medium business, but it's difficult to see a lot of cases so far where these are integrated into the small medium business. And actually, Mark Vange actually brought up another point. Voice-based interactions are cool, but audio-based AI processing is an order of magnitude more expensive than equivalent text functionality. So doing that. So I don't know that it's an order of magnitude more expensive, because basically, you've got things like Amazon Alexa and other Google-based APIs and other APIs that have been transcribing from audio to text at high speed at relatively low cost for a long time. So speech to text is pretty established application of machine learning. So I don't know that I would agree that it adds a whole nother digit to the price. It doesn't go from $10 to $100. But I will agree with what Mark's saying, that it's a lot more expensive. And so integrating this in and making this part of your real-time engineering for your call flow is interesting. So I think the question there is, can you make things more efficient? So are we going to see innovations like DeepSeek that are going to make this appear to be a lot less expensive than it seems to be right now. Are there going to be big efficiency wins? And I think another question
Yes.
is, are there ways of bringing the efficiency into an aggregated environment? So that's what Alianza is talking about is don't try to build out your service provider with stacks and stacks of servers with GPUs in them. Uh, Use us as part of your call flow. So I'll bring another company in. So in addition to Alianza, Simwood is talking about this. So Simwood, based in the UK, is talking about something like this, where basically they're going to be able to bring in products, and so you can route some of your call audio through them and get it. So instead of trying to build it yourself, you're going to get it somewhere else, and then you're going to pay for your fractional share of the use. And so this is such early days that investors are really they're subsidizing a lot of the features and products that are out there. And so it's hard to see who's got a sustainable business model around this. Any other thoughts on kind of what you've seen around efficiency of, processing this stuff, Jason?
Yeah, I was gonna say I definitely don't think it's an order of magnitude, only because you know, while it's not, I guess, directly applicable like DeepL, I know that there's like $25, I think it was, per 1 million tokens, and generic LLM is, if you go with Google or something, it's like $1.50 to $3, something like that per million. So yeah, it's more expensive now, but they're using like super deep learning that they're trying to sell. I'd be surprised if the price of that doesn't come down. And it's, yeah, I don't think it'll be an order of magnitude or anything like that. Just to go back to the question.
Yeah. Well, we would love to talk to you some more. Jason and I are available to do chit chat or to work with you on a project, help you evaluate what might be a fit. Like I said, we're really excited about looking for products that can integrate in either at the SIP level or using the existing APIs and platforms like Metaswitch and Broadworks and NetSapiens, and other platforms as well that are able to work with these. So we'd love to hear from other vendors and other providers who have interfaces that can be integrated into service providers like that. Love to talk to you some more about any of these projects or to help you with product development and engineering design. Thanks for joining us today on the webinar. Thanks, Jason.
Yep. Thanks, Mark.